What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. Oldschool Runescape as a game is quite unique and different from the standard and kind of classic style of MMORPG games. Its gameplay and overall style has made it stand out over the years and generate quite a niche community, which is definitely a really awesome thing in a time where a genre became flooded with things that were, at the time, relatively the same. However, with a unique set of gameplay mechanics comes a unique set of challenges for the developers, and today I wanted to take a look at the development of what has probably been one of the most iconic releases to Oldschool RuneScape since its conception, and that is the Chambers of Xeric. So join us today in taking a look back at the development and design of the Chambers of Xeric to find out what raids could have been. And if you enjoyed the video, definitely hit that like button or let us know in the comment section below, and be sure to subscribe for some more videos. Now, the Chambers of Xeric in Oldschool RuneScape were definitely not as easy to implement as one might think originally, and the developers had to overcome a massive set of challenges to make the content feel and play nicely with the game itself. The Chambers of Xeric were originally teased at RuneFest in 2015, but it actually began the early phases of development as early as 2014. The goal for Jagex here was to create a piece of content that was, aspirational, something that maybe the new or early players would want to play eventually, something they could work towards, as well as to create a really awesome piece of endgame content. They wanted it to be unique and fun with a lot of depth so that players would be able to keep on playing it again and again for the fun as well as the rewards, of course. The thing is that Jagex wanted to achieve this complex variety without necessarily deviating from the core simplicity that Oldschool RuneScape is designed with. This is when the team began to adopt their early design concepts. They decided to design it based around modular challenges, which can be seen in the Chambers of Xeric as it consists of a bunch of different boss rooms, challenge rooms, and all sorts of cool stuff. This was a core fundamental in making something like raids fit into the overall theme of Oldschool RuneScape. Instead of classes and roles that we see in games such as maybe World of Warcraft or other MMOs, it's pretty clear that there is no tanks, no healers, no DPS classes within the raids of Oldschool RuneScape. Instead, it allows players to be proficient in their skills, such as hunting, fishing, or farming. It allows the players to contribute to the party by preparing supplies that's niche to their skill set. And this would allow players to perhaps specialize in certain roles or tasks if they wanted to, and provided a nice way of what they could do in the form of supplies such as potions, cooked food, and all sorts of stuff. Oldschool RuneScape itself does have a pretty basic combat system, and that's something that's been a really big part of the game, and it's something that I think most players probably think is a good thing. However, it does create quite a lot of interesting challenges when it comes to designing complex boss fights or interesting encounters, since the mechanics that you can actually do yourself with the combat system are quite limited. In fact, they're almost entirely non-existent. And so Jagex had to come up with certain designs for each boss and encounter that would take place throughout the entire raids. And this was accomplished in many different ways. Of course, each boss is its own thing, but the general concept here is that Jagex designs bosses to where they kind of use the room that the boss is in as an enemy, in a sense. The boss is doing all sorts of crazy things, they're throwing stuff at you, they're attacking you, but at the same time, the room that the boss is in is maybe throwing obstacles at you, or perhaps generating a puzzle, or adding a nice extra mechanic. And that's essentially the main way that they design boss fights without actually making the inherent combat system in the game more complex. And now that we've taken a look at some of the story of how raids were developed, I wanted to dive into probably the more interesting stuff, which is what was cancelled from the release of raids. With such a complex design process, lots of things came up and later became scrapped, especially items, armors, and weapons, really just rewards in general. And if some of them have made it into the game, it could have honestly changed quite a lot of what we know as Oldschool RuneScape today. Now, as most of you know, one of the rewards from raids in general is just a scroll which unlocks prayers. And there were actually 3 different prayers that were originally planned on being added into the game as a reward from raids. These prayers were known as Poison Absorb, Divine Grace, and Venom Absorb. Starting with the first one, Poison Absorb, it kind of just does exactly what you would think of. When you would take damage from poison effects, it would actually drain prayer points from you instead of hit points. Divine Grace would allow players who are running to drain prayer points instead of run energy when it was active, and Venom Absorb, similar to Poison Absorb, would allow Venom to drain prayer points instead of hit points. Now, these prayers were most likely just scrapped because of how they stand compared to the other choices that actually made it into the game. While they are useful, they just don't really make sense for the overall Oldschool RuneScape theme, and they're kind of a little bit out of place in terms of mechanics, and they definitely would have been pretty overpowered in certain situations too. Another interesting reward that was completely scrapped from raids was the Ancient Insignia. This set of items would have been equipped in the ammo slot, which would have aided the player in combat. There was a total of 5 different types of insignias planned, and they were known as the Yumi Insignia, Seiji, Benkai, Kabe, and Risutoa, all of which offered various bonuses. Yumi, for example, would offer a 10% chance for each shot to splinter, which would allow it to hit up to 2 additional targets. It also provided +5 range attack and +5 magic defense. Seiji, on the other hand, would provide a 10% chance to negate the rune cost of casting a spell, and it provided 5 magic attack and 5 in all melee defenses. Benkai would boost all prayer stats by 10%, and Kabe would give +5 to all defenses. And lastly, there was Risutoa, which caused special attacks to regenerate twice as fast when out of combat, and it also provided a +2 in all accuracy and defense bonuses. These items were scrapped from the rewards as the player base were not really a fan of the ideas in general. They kind of just seemed unbalanced from one another, and certain insignias definitely had a much stronger advantage over the others, and in general, an item that gives a really powerful effect being equipped in the ammo slot is, pretty overpowered. It's almost like adding a second ring slot to the game in a sense. Ultimately though, they were scrapped and never made it into the game. And there was also quite a few sets of armor that actually didn't make the cut into the rewards. These armors were actually planned to be a major part of the rewards for raids in the original iteration, and they were the Elder Armor, the Twisted Armor, the Kodai Robes, and the Dragon Plate Body. However, of course, the Dragon Plate Body, as we know, did end up making it into the game eventually, just not as a reward for raids. The Elder, Twisted, and Kodai armor sets, on the other hand, did not make it in at all, and they're definitely pretty interesting pieces of equipment to take a look at. Starting us off with the Elder armor, which was going to be the melee armor set reward. It required level 75 defense to equip and provided really high bonuses in terms of melee stats. They would degrade in a similar way to Barrows, where after 10 hours of use they would need to be recharged with a coin purchase. Quite notably, the Elder Armor was noted as something that was planned to be extremely hard to get and a very, very rare rewards from raids, to justify the new addition of an upgraded armor tier for level 75 in the melee category. They would have been the new best in slot melee armor and would have been really nice and provided a very strong strength bonus. However, it was voted against by the community and scrapped from entering the live game as a result of people just didn't like the power creep and making the game stronger with new best in slot items. There was also the Twisted Armor, which was going to be the ranged armor set. It required both level 75 range and defense, and it was planned to become the first set of armor in the game that provides a ranged strength bonus. This set was identical to the previous Elder Armor in that it also degraded at the same 10-hour rate when worn and needed coins to recharge. It would have been another new best in slot tier level 75 armor set, but based off the player feedback in terms of not wanting the power creep, it was met with the same fate as the Elder Armor and scrapped completely. There was also the Kodai Robes, which followed similarly to the previous two, being the magic armor set, requiring 75 magic and defense, and of course having the same degrading pattern. It offered a significant number of stats and benefits for magic, including a significant plus 80 magic attack bonus for the full set, as well as a pretty nice set of defense bonuses. However, it was voted out as a reward as well because the stats were deemed to just be too powerful, and it was later replaced with Ancestral Robes. On another note, Abyssal Claws were also considered to be a reward instead of Dragon Claws from the game. However, Jagex decided that it would be better to just add in Dragon Claws as players were much more familiar with the item, and there wasn't really many advantages for doing Abyssal Claws with a level 70 attack requirement compared to Dragon Claws with a level 60. Either way, despite all the scrapped items and removed content, we did eventually get our very well made and quite enjoyable raids released to the game. However, they weren't perfect on release, and this was definitely reflected in the changes that were made after the actual release came to the game. Most significantly, note the nerf that happened to the Twisted Bow, of course. Specifically, the bow was given a maximum cap on the damage buff that it could get from the target's magic level. Before the buff, Twisted Bow was honestly just the most insane item ever released to Oldschool RuneScape probably. With the change in place, the buff would max out against targets with level 250 magic, and it was much needed because of the high amounts of damage it would begin to output using its bonus damage buff, and as well, a lot of boss monsters in the game had their magic levels changed as a result of the release of the Twisted Bow. And even still to this day, the Twisted Bow is a really powerful item, and probably one of the most iconic things that came to the game as a result of raids. Alongside the Twisted Bow changes, lots of things were also altered after the release of raids, but there's just way too many to go through one by one. You know, things like the overall time consumption while doing certain things during raids, changes to fishing spots, stat changes, boss rebalancing, as well as the addition of raid storage chests, Xeric teleports, and the replacement of the Kodai wand with the Kodai enchantment, which would then be consumed onto the Master Wand, creating the Kodai wand in turn. Anyway, that's just about going to wrap up all the things I wanted to talk about regarding raids. Definitely let us know if you like this kind of video, this kind of format. It's something that we cover a lot on some of our other channels that we make videos on, and I thought it would be really fun to bring this kind of style to Old School RuneScape. So if you liked the video, definitely hit that like button, subscribe if you want, and I'll see you guys next time.